4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
You're about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, we are pleased and honored that Rick Rule, legendary commodities investor, has accepted our invitation to be on our show to discuss the status of commodity investing, an asset class that is starting to attract attention on Wall Street. Mr. Rule is the chairman and founder of Sprott U.S. Holding and president of Sprott Asset Management. I want you to please feel free to call in. This will be about a half-hour broadcast, but if you have a quick question, please feel free to call in 646-652-4620. If you do call, press the 1 button so we know that you want to break in, because we have 30 incoming lines and some people just listen to the broadcast on their phones. All right, so do press the 1 button so we'll know that you want to cut in. All right, and Mr. Rule, thank you very much for being on our program. It's an honor to have you here today.
Joe, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, you know, I listened to your broadcast with King World News with Eric King, and you had mentioned that we are in sort of an upswing, but you are incredibly cautious in your projections of where the precious metals market is going. Can you expound on that a little bit? You would think at this point in time, after all of the resets that we've had and disappointments we've had, that this would be nirvana for us. This would be the time that we're dancing in the street. But you don't exactly share that position.
Well, I'm not anti-dancing, Joe. The truth is that everybody feels better about the sector now than they felt about it a year ago, and there's good reason for that. The artificially low interest rates in this country and the zero interest rate policies in other countries at once reduce the cost of holding precious metals in terms of the foregone interest, and have made competing obligations, competing instruments, less attractive. So I feel that this precious metals bull market has strong underpinnings. My reservations come about from sort of three places. The first is that almost religious adherence that precious metal speculators have to precious metals, and their sense that the price action that they've seen so far justifies their narrative. I think people need to take a balanced look at this. The second thing is that the markets have come awfully far, awfully fast. And in my experience, bull markets need to back and fill. You need to consolidate. And that's risky because people's expectations of the future are set by their experience in the immediate past. And investors' experience in the last 5 years in precious metals has been atrocious, which is to say that if the gold price fell from its current level down to 1,100 again, which it could do easily, many people who were attracted to precious metals might be shaken out, because that little decline would, in their own mind, trigger memories of the last 5 years. People need to steel themselves, prepare themselves for an interim decline that would be normal and natural, but would be terrifying given people's experience in the past. The third thing is that the rally that we've seen in the gold equities has outpaced the rally that we've seen in the metal. And you are going to need some follow through in the metal to sustain the rally in the stocks, simply because the rally in the stocks has led to so many issuances from so many companies that the new supply of paper could, in the near term, outstrip demand without the metal following through. I'm sorry for the long, wordy answer, Joe, but you asked a big question.
Yeah. Well, I have to confess, I am in my investments is primarily in commodities. I am one of those sick people who held on to everything that they had for the past 5 years and saw my net worth drop by over 60%, which was not pleasant. But for some reason, it didn't bother me as much as you think it would, because I knew that I was hopefully not going to access, had no interest in accessing that money, but eventually it would bounce back, and I never knew when that would happen. And my logic was this: is that there's turmoil in the entire planet. I mean, let's face it, we're not in a very benign political climate or military climate. You take countries like Switzerland, which was supposed to be the cornerstone of the strong currency. They're in the highest negative interest rates in the European continent. So we see all of this little chaos around the world. In South America, the downturn in Southeast Asia, the problems that they have in Europe with the immigration, mainly because of Western interference, in those countries. And I can go on for an hour on all this stuff, but you know where I'm going. And I always thought that, boy, if anything, precious metals would come back with a vengeance and well exceed its highs of 5 years ago. And that's what sort of kept me going, because I didn't like anything else that was going on. And that was a little naive on my part, I have to admit.
Well, yes, and I have a couple comments to that. The first thing is, at least for the next 18 months, I think that you have to segregate between precious metals and other commodities that aren't simultaneously mediums of exchange. You have to segregate between precious metals and things like energy and industrial materials. I believe that we're well and truly in a precious metals bull market, pullbacks notwithstanding. My suspicion is, given a global lack of demand for everything else, that the bear market in materials can continue easily for another 18 months. It wouldn't surprise me if a bottom has been put in other materials, but I personally don't expect a V-shaped recovery. I expect a saucer-shaped recovery. We can talk about why later in your show. With regards to the case you make for the precious metals, I think you are absolutely correct. I would point out, however, that being a bull on precious metals doesn't require a negative or an apocalyptic outlook.
Right.
One of the other reasons that one would buy precious metals are because of a gradual increase in the economic circumstance of very poor people in large parts of the world, East Asia and South Asia, that have had a traditional cultural affinity to gold and silver. And the fact that people in Asia are very gradually becoming a little more free means that they are reasonably rapidly becoming a lot more rich. And two things have happened there. One, the governments in those countries have moved to formalize and legalize precious metals ownership, meaning that people who have a cultural predisposition to own it are allowed to own it. And secondly, their means to purchase it, their incomes and their savings matrices, are increasing fairly rapidly. So one of the things that has set up, I think, the price recovery in precious metals that we've seen is increasing physical offtake from weak holders, central banks, pension funds, and institutions in the West, to strong holders, unleveraged, cash, retail savers in Asia. My point is simply that you don't need an apocalyptic outlook. And certainly when I look at some of the political trends in the West, I share your concerns. But it's important to note that there are other constituencies for gold and silver, which are very, very, very bullish.
Yeah. Do you think that since it appears, or the statistics that we receive, more people have less money to spend, disposable income. Incomes are actually in negative territory relative to 20 and 30 years ago. And those people who have additional income, who are old-fashioned like I am, you save first, you eat second, that's where I came from, there's going to be a larger class divide. For example, those people who are not monetarists, so to speak, but those people who believe in the old-fashioned ethic of you work, you save, and then you eat type thing, versus a multitude of people who, well, provided I have a good credit score and there's room on my credit card, I can go out and buy something else. That'll put me in more negative territory, but I'll have a heck of a good time doing it. What I see is a bifurcation even in the United States between those people who have and those people who don't have. And the don't have seem to be growing and getting deeper in debt. And those people who have, which is a much smaller group, infinitesimal group, right, percentage-wise, but also are increasing their net worth. So you're going to see a more bifurcation within society of the have and have-nots. Am I oversimplifying this?
Joe, I think you've put your finger very neatly on the pulse of the greatest social issue in the United States. Before you and I were on the air together, you described the success that one of your predecessors, I believe your grandfather, had immigrating to the United States penniless, coming into a situation where I suspect, like my own grandfather, he arrived and had his U.S. identification stamped WOP, a WOP,
right.
Came without papers. That's where the thing came from. He came here in the Great Depression when things couldn't have been worse, and he succeeded mightily. And the truth is, there is more opportunity today than there was then. But there is a circumstance in the country where increasing numbers of people believe that it's society's obligation to sustain them in the manner to which they would like to become accustomed, without any sense that you need to generate utility for others to build wealth yourself. People who exemplify the attitude of your grandfather and your own attitude will do extremely well in this society, because we still have, how would you say, the most innovative society on the planet. We still generate more private value in the United States than happens anywhere else. We're having a struggle between a class that creates utility and gets rewarded and a class that consumes utility and doesn't get rewarded. If you listen to the popular narrative on the left and on the right, what I call the old fat white losers, the fascists that support Trump and the fascists that support Saunders, there is an amazing narrative in this country about what the world owes people who don't generate utility. Unfortunately, if you listen to the centrist fascists, the Cruzes, the Clintons, there is a different class of people who have figured out how to be rent seekers, people who have figured out how to use the political apparatus to gain benefits for themselves and their class that they don't get through the market. The old-fashioned value creators like yourself, your grandfather, and like many of my own clients will do extremely well in this situation. Their risk is that the wealth that they generate by creating utility for others will be stolen by the Commonwealth.
You know, it's interesting. My father, when my father was alive, he always talked about people's mentality. He must have used that word 3 times every day. I got to a point where everything was mentality. What's your mentality about this? And that was how he expressed himself. And it was interesting. 25 years ago, my wife was in partnership with otolaryngologist in this office, and she said, I don't want to do this anymore. She said, I just want to have my own small practice, and I just want to practice audiology, and that's all. I want to be left alone and all this. And there's no problem. I mean, she had great rapport with them. In fact, she still does have a great rapport with them. But she didn't want to be this quasi-large practice. And she asked me, she said, so I want to open my own practice. I said, okay, we'll do that this Saturday. She says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, we'll do it this Saturday. She said, well, what do you know about opening an audiology practice? I said, honey, absolutely nothing, but I'll find out when I get there. And it was about 2 or 3 weeks later, we had rented a place in the lobby of the Utica Square Medical Center, a beautiful old building, you know, and she just, it was amazing to her. She said, you never read a thing about this stuff. I said, no, we'll find out when we get there. And today she's still in practice, and she has a fine practice. In fact, she has 2 offices, actually 4 places that she goes to. And my point being is that I'm not patting myself on the back, but that's how I grew up. When I speak to young people today, what I just told you is so foreign to them, they can't identify with anything like that. And I ask young people all the time, what are you doing? What do you want to do? And the answers I usually get is, I think I'll teach. I said, well, what you're doing is you're going from the back of the class to the front of the class. You haven't changed a thing. But really, what do you want to do with your life? And they don't have an answer to that. And I find that deeply disturbing.
Joe, 2 comments to that. First, your success came because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You had a good mentality.
Right. Thank you, Dad.
You went forward and got after it. Didn't think about how you could fail. You thought about how you could succeed. So kudos to you. With regards to your second comment, I don't think you could be more wrong in my own experience. The young people I meet today, maybe I get to hang out with a great class of young people, but the young people that I meet today are well-educated, highly motivated, scared to death, and work like scalded dogs. Before the discussion that you and I were having now, we had a discussion of a student group called Students for Liberty,
yes,
which began 10 years ago with 8 kids at Georgetown University, and now enjoys 150,000 practicing members worldwide. I, when I'm asked, appear at local chapter meetings, and I contribute what I can financially. And I have to say, when I compare myself at 21 and 22 and 23 with the young people who either work for Sprott now right out of university, or the ones who I encounter at Students for Liberty or Liberty on the Rocks or other libertarian young persons organizations that I see around the world, or the young people that I communicate with on a daily basis at liberty.me, the young people that I encounter are uniformly substantially better in any regard that I was at their age. So my own outlook is that the problem with our society isn't so much the kids, it's the legacy that you and I are leaving them.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Maybe I'm asking the wrong question to the wrong people. But I that has not been. I wish my experience was as good as yours. And again, there's Students for Liberty, there's Young Americans for Liberty, 2 organizations. I support both of those. I have them on my program. I've been to their events and whatever. And I applaud them, and they really are good thinkers, and I agree with you 100%. I just don't get that. Maybe in the state of Oklahoma, we just don't have that, So I just not sure. And oh, by the way, I wanted to confirm, did you say you wanted to be on for 20 minutes or 30 minutes? Did you?
30 minutes is great. I'm tempted to say as long as you'll have me, but I have another obligation afterwards.
All right, you want to cut out after 30 minutes, you said?
30 minutes is great.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, fine. I just didn't want to cut you short, nor did I want to overextend the stay. What I need to do is I need to do a little bit better job of qualifying, who I'm talking to, and I have to do some work in that regard, because I'm kind of discouraged, and I wish I was as enthusiastic as you were. I want to be, because some of them that I meet are just terrific, and I agree with you. It's just that I have not had that experience that you had, and I wish I did. Well, let's change the subject a little bit. From world events that are going on, obviously they're not going exactly in a very positive direction. We have to. The students are afraid. They are concerned. They know there's a problem, and I see this, and it's amplified during these election debates, where the answers to the questions are nonsensical. They just don't attack the issue. No one asked the question, why is it this case? Why do we have the situation the way it is? No one wants to ask that question, but everyone has a solution, but they can't tell you really what the problem is. And so I see this as a growing problem, and not correcting all the mistakes we've made in the past. So I'm not optimistic about the future, and that's why I'm so, I guess, positive about protecting my wealth and protecting my family by putting money in commodities that will hopefully always have some value.
Joe, when you get into the political arena, I'm at least as pessimistic as you. I'm reminded of a couple of great quotes. I think they're both from Mencken. One is that an election can be best defined as an advanced auction of stolen property. And if you think about Alan Greenspan said that savers are never protected in a representative democracy because there's more spenders than savers. And the spenders will always outvote the savers. And so your instinct, that is to defend what's yours from those who desire it, is entirely rational and logical. The political response of many people then is to try and dominate the political debate so that their own version of theft,
Right.
their own class wins the auction. And I think that's described best by another quote, which I also think was from Mencken, but I don't remember. It said that politics can best be understood by examining the root words. Poly, of course, from the Latin for many, but tick from the English colloquial for small blood-sucking insects. Think about the process as a competition between many small blood-sucking insects. You'll understand, I think, the political dynamic. And when you confine your examination of the affairs of mankind to a political examination, the pessimism that you feel, I think, is real and accurate. And that is certainly a reason why one would store one's wealth in a medium of exchange that is simultaneously a store of value. Gold isn't a promise to pay entered into by society. It's payment itself.
Right.
And so in that regard, I think you are exactly correct. The optimism that I evidence has not very much to do with politics and a lot more to do with entrepreneurialism, increasing levels of education, and the astonishing sophistication of young people who I meet who are mostly allergic to politics.
Yeah. You know, for the past 5 or 6 decades, Brazil has been tagged as the nation of the future. And it's always the nation of the future, and primarily because the bureaucracy that blocks any sort of innovation, entrepreneurship, gets squelched because it can't filter through all of the government bureaucracy in order to get anything done. So it has great natural resources. It has hardworking people. It has a good coastline. It has everything, good education system, but it's always the country of the future. And whenever I see the United States today, I see Brazil. I see us copying Brazil with the 70,000 pieces of legislation that's considered every year. 70,000 people. Now, that all don't get enacted, but a good portion do. And I see us going the same way as Brazil. Am I overstating that position?
No, I'm not sure you are, although I believe there is still a residual American culture which exists somehow parallel to or outside the state. I think the culture of innovation is still alive in the United States. And I think there's still a subtext in the United States that says that to succeed is a good thing. Certainly there's a supposition on the part of some of the popular press and much of academia that behind any aggregation of wealth is a great crime. But mercifully in the United States, I think there's an enormous body of people. There is a part of our intellectual heritage which says that creating wealth by creating utility for others is still more than acceptable. It's still part of the fabric of American life. I certainly agree that the prevailing ethos among the elites is that rather than create wealth, what we're supposed to do is redistribute wealth according to some idiot's ethic of fairness. But there's strong resistance to that in the country, mercifully.
Yes. Yeah, we have an undercurrent that Brazil does not possess, and I agree with that. And
by the way, we have an extremely strong chapter, an extremely strong subgroup at liberty.me in Brazil. And Brazil has the second biggest and the fastest growing Mises society in the world. So the punchback from free, young, educated Brazilians to the ethos of theft is very, very strong. Now, it isn't anything that I expect will prevail in the near term, but the intellectual trends in Brazil among young people are wholly positive for the point of view espoused so well by yourself.
Do you see a currency collapse in the near, when I say near future, next 2-3 years?
I do not. Currency collapse is a function of confidence. And
oh boy,
for better or
the
for
con
worse,
game, you mean, right? Okay.
Yes, sir. The undercurrent is that. And the con game is extremely successful. The current fiscal policies of the United States, while they wouldn't appeal to somebody who got through third grade arithmetic, seem to appeal to the masses a lot. There seems to be a feeling in the country that the political class, the elites, stick-handled in hockey parlance the crisis of 2008, which many people identify as a market rather than a regulatory failing. I think, again, another quote that I don't remember the author of, there is an awful lot of ruin left in a country as great as this one.
Jack,
And I
you
don't
have a
suspect
Jack?
that you are going to see a currency collapse, particularly in the United States. The strength of the fiat U.S. specie relative to other countries' currencies is interesting. I don't think it goes to the fact that the United States is a particularly great credit. I think it goes to the fact that the currencies that we compete against are so weak. As my friend Doug Casey says, we have the advantage of being the prettiest mare at the slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
But I think the line in front of us is long enough that 2 or 3 years is something that isn't a risk.
Yeah. Last question. We never solved the problems of 2008. We took a person who was very ill, if you will, the analogy would be, and pumped them up with enough morphine so they really felt great. And every month they come in for their morphine shot, and they keep on going. Well, now several years later, the patient is a lot weaker, a lot more sick, if you will, much more ill, and we're still pumping morphine, and now the morphine doesn't seem to work as well. Is that an analogy for our economy and what we're doing with negative interest rates and pumping money in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, and do we see a repeat of 2008, but on steroids?
If you don't cure an underlying condition, and 2008 didn't cure an underlying condition, you still have a problem. We don't have a solvency. We don't have a liquidity issue in the United States. There's lots of cash in circulation,
right.
But we do have a long-term solvency issue, which we have to deal with, either by gradual default by way of inflation or a more honest default. Now, the addiction that you describe to fake money, to counterfeiting, in fact, is real. But again, the answer is more bifurcated. There were several groups in America that took the lessons of 2008 to heart. Some individuals strengthened their own balance sheets and got rid of their own debt. Corporate America got scared to death. They saw their access to credit go away, and corporate balance sheets are the strongest that they have been in recorded history. As a collective, however, we didn't learn the lessons at all. And the adjustment that will be forced on at least those who didn't save, and possibly those who did save, as those who didn't save continue to steal from them, is going to be an interesting and I suspect unpleasant process.
Right. Yeah. Well, Rick, we're just about at that witching hour. I'd like to give the last minute to you to advise our audience how they may reach you, if you'd like that, and how they can contact you. And just if you want to wrap it up or say a few closing words, we'd like to hear that also.
Sure. We would be delighted to interact with your listeners, particularly if they're interested in investing in precious metals or natural resources. We believe that Sprott is a bit of a brand name, particularly for precious metals investing. Come to our website, www.sprottglobal.com. Email us at contact@sprottglobal.com, and we will send you our blog. information from the best minds at Sprott and the best minds we have access to outside Sprott, I guarantee your listeners will get their money's worth because it's absolutely free. Alternatively, if you have questions about resource investing, you can email me directly, rrule, that's R-R-U-L-E, at sprottglobal.com. Or if you're in the United States or Canada, call us at 800-477-7853. It's been a pleasure, Joe. Thank you for having me on.
Rick, thank you so much. I hope you will accept our invitation to return at a later date.
I look forward to it.
That's great, Rick. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you, sir.
Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you are either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well, stay tuned.